Well, happy Saturday, Scott Baker.
Indeed, Mikey, it is Saturday, February 14th. That would be Valentine's Day here in the United States. And
Oh,
glad to
yeah.
have you all here for Lead Better. And where, it's all about love here, right? That's what we do. Now, it's all about field notes. Occasionally, love is slipped in there. Field notes today is going to be number 1710, encouraging more contribution in team meetings. It's a great thing to talk about on Saturday meetings. Let's talk about meetings. But I'm gonna make a slight confession, and it's not necessarily like the regular day-to-day work meeting. I think I've always loved meetings. I think I've always loved conferences. And I heard Dr. Rob Gilbert, who does a little call-in motivational line. He's been doing it for like 30 years. And he just has talked about that from time to time, where he always has loved going to conferences, hearing speakers, interacting with the other people that are there, sharing insights in the hallways. And I just remember as a teenager, I thought that was really cool. I would sign up to go to conferences. I remember one time when I was probably, I don't know, 16, 17 years old, my parents let me fly from Washington, D.C. to San Diego to stay with a family they knew, like I wasn't off by myself. And I just spent 3 days going and listening to people. And then we have this other side, whereas people are like, meetings are the death. It's all just sort of drivel, and we all just sit around and don't talk about anything. And we should just, have stand-up meetings only. And so I don't know if we can find today, this is my challenge to you, a happy balance around what's the kind of thing where we come together, we get invigorated, we get new ideas, and then at the other end, we're not just sitting around and wasting time for an hour.
No, I'm with you. I only went to conferences in a previous life when it was not corporate, right? When there was no, and so the idea of like this should have been an email never entered into my frame of reference until corporate life started, right? And then I started hearing it from others, and I'm like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to hate these, but
Right.
but I'm with you. I really enjoyed being able to get together and talk. We have our annual meetings, which I don't even think of as meetings. The daily Zoom calls that I have with various other teams, those are the things that I think of as meetings. And that's really what I think we're talking about here.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's sort of just the routine. And I think there's a lot of like brilliant things in this field note for us to talk about. So, but there is between those things, like we just had our company meetings, which are every 2 months, where we get together for 2.5 days because we are kind of have people all spread out. We'll meet in Philadelphia or Chicago or Arizona or different places, and those are sort of structured for a certain kind of rhythm. And then you have the ones that are scheduled. And then you have ones that we're like, okay, we need to have a separate meeting to talk about that. But the key here, and what we're really talking about, is what does contribution look like? So what are we expecting? What would we like to have happen? And then how does the leader then actually facilitate making that possible or not possible? So, and I think that the quality of a company could probably be measured by the quality of the meetings and the quality of the contribution in the meetings.
Right. So is it true then that the leaders are the one who create the climate in the room of a meeting? Or oftentimes, if you're the person who calls the meeting, but you're not necessarily the leader in the room, do you have the ability to influence that climate more than the leader does? Or does it feel like all of this kind of rises and falls on the leaders because there's such a gravitational force typically with who the leader in the room is, that they're the ones who are creating the climate?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's the challenge here, right? And that's the challenge to the leader. You have to be aware of the outsized impact that you have on the climate in the room. And I always like that old phrase. What was the thing about be a thermostat, not a thermometer? Meaning it's like you're not just there going like, yeah, I guess it's hot today, I guess it's a cold day. It's like, can I actually change the impact of what's happening in here? Can I warm it up? Can I cool it down? Whatever that thing is. And you would like to think that we all would play some of that role in our organizations. If we know kind of where we're going, the kind of impact we're trying to have, if we have respect and enjoy working with the other people at different points, people will be dragging, people will be frustrated. Can you move if you're a leader and you're to make people and situations better, can you make the meeting better? And I think that we could all be. Now, you can't have 10 different thermometer or thermostats in the room. You're gonna have things going up and down. That could be a little bit hectic. But I mean, I think you should all be in a position to say, the meeting, can the meeting be important even if the leader has turned it into something, that's frustrating?
Right. So we like to get very behavioral when we talk about the field notes of the day, and lucky for us today, this particular field note called out specifically 6 behaviors, and the like very specific actions to take during a meeting that will actually help do what we're saying, encouraging more contribution.
Yeah, list them first. List all of them just to kind of get us give it the juice before we dive into it.
So number one that we've probably heard of before and thought through and probably practiced, calling out good questions. Number 2, calling out respectful dissent. Calling out changed minds. Number 3. Number 4, calling out specific recommendations. Number 5, calling out surfacing risks and trade-offs. And the 6th one, calling out evidence-based opinions. Now, I think that in terms of like what a behavior is and what I've ever seen consistently practice, the only one I've ever even thought of here is calling out good questions. And oftentimes that's reflexive because people are trying to think of an answer and they're kind of stalling for time. And calling out, saying, "Oh, that's a good question," really means, "Oh, that's a question I've never heard of before." Or, "Oh, that's a question I've never really thought of the answer, so let me give myself a little bit of time to think here." And so the fact that we're stumped a little bit, we say, "That's a good question." I think maybe we can kind of tweak what a real good question is when we compliment it that way. But that's the only reason that we hear the reflex of that behavior come out so often, is not because we're trying to adjust good, get more good get more good contributions in the room,
Right.
but because we're trying to figure out how to answer the question instead. And so these other 5 are great, and those are the ones that behavioral are really encouraging for us to be able to say, how often do you call out number 2? I see that you've kind of adjusted your thinking on that, and I think it's great that we all can see in real time that people are flexible enough to actually kind of change their mind. That's I respect that. That's great. That's fantastic. I don't think I've ever heard that called out in public in a meeting before, but I think it's fantastic to be able to do, especially if it's not being too manipulative.
Yeah, I agree. I think that all of these that you've outlined, and it's interesting when you say, some of these I hadn't thought about as things to highlight, that when you're having a meeting, there's an objective to the meeting. All right, we're trying to get this done, or sometimes it's the objective is just to have an open discussion and generate ideas. But however as the leader, and how the company then or the organization starts to have a pattern of meetings, it's a flywheel. Like, you begin to say, here's how we do it. Here's what it looks like. Here's what and it's just like a practice session for an athletic team. I'm sure that certain professional teams, their practices feel different than other organizations. So when you say, we like good questions, we like dissent, we like raising risks and trade-off, we like doing these things, and we're not as scared of these things, because what you're doing is you're conditioning, you're reinforcing for your best contributors and performers, this is what the rhythm looks like. And for the new folks that come into the organization, this is how you start to step into this. And I think that it's the biggest part of this, easily the biggest part of this, is we all say, yeah, this is great. All of these sound terrific. But then we get prickly when it actually happens. Leaders do, people do. It's just sort of human nature. You kind of go in, you kind of still want, you're like, yeah, we are really for respectful dissent, except not that dissent. Can we stop with that one? Right. And then, we might be for like raising risks, and you're like, we're never going to get everything done if you keep raising all these risks. Right. So you have to really decide, how do I go about doing this? Now, I do like the idea of saying whatever it is that you're highlighting. If you're saying, excellent question, love that. In fact, the whole thing about change minds is if you come in with respectful dissent and I go, I think I've been on the wrong track on this. Let me take a couple steps back. How would we redo this if we were doing it a different way? If you come in and with an evidence-based opinion, and I was like, I had no idea that that's kind of how what we needed to know about this. If you as the leader are demonstrating that, you're going to get more of it. And if you're resisting it, if you're pushing it down, if you're beating people up for that, if you're cutting them off, then you're going to get less of it, for sure.
Right. No, and that's the climate setting part for a leader is that if they want more of it, then they need to model it in a lot of ways. So which is more valuable, do you think, Scott? Like if I wanted to set the conditions for more contributions being made in the area of changed minds, should I change my mind in public? Is that more powerful than me calling out somebody else who's changed their mind? Like which is actually the stickier behavioral example?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose probably, I don't know that it's a 50-50. I think probably a lot of the time, just demonstrating how your own mind is evolving around something is probably more helpful. And then occasionally, because it's probably going to be more rare that you can kind of say, well, remember, because Julie used to, she was a big believer in that. And you're not on that page anymore, right, Julie? And Julie's like, totally right. I used to be a big believer in this, but now I realize that it was this, and we had that one meeting. And if everybody sees it that way, then those moments will come up. But I've studied a lot of different leaders, both in meetings and in communication, and one that I've seen and studied. His kind of talks about the way that when he's leading a classroom situation, that he actually has to be demonstrating what the process is of wrestling with a very difficult question, where he's not even sure where his own presentation is going to go, because he's going to do this in front of everybody. And then maybe dialogue comes to be, but you're going to watch that process happening. And I think that's a great thing for a leader to demonstrate too, because then you can say, I'm coming in thinking about this, but I'm not sure about this. And then as this happens, you go, okay, you haven't convinced me yet, but you brought some evidence. And I know you're challenging me on this point. So let's dig into that a little bit. And if I get enthusiastic, if I get curious, then all kinds of great things happen. If I start to insult or shut down, or that's not the way I do it, or it's just not our style, or we're going to do it a whole different way, you're going to get way less of it.
Yeah. Now, I do think I think I know the speaker that you're talking about. And I think I've heard him on a podcast kind of mention that that's what his process is and that's what he's going for. I've listened to several of his speeches as well. And I've never heard him introduce that this is what he's doing up front. So the first several
he's just
times,
doing it. Right.
But I'm not sure how I feel about, like, the first few times that I heard him do that, I really felt like, why isn't he prepared? Like, I was distracted as a viewer. And until I heard him call himself out in this other podcast where he explained what he was doing and why he was doing it, did I find it to be a respectful process. But I'm telling you, I listened to 4 or 5 of his speeches.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and you can see that.
And I was like, why? I don't understand why he's not coming with more preparation. And so it was a little bit frustrating. Yeah.
I can certainly see that. And I think in a way that leaders need to be, there's a clarity that we need in these kind of meetings. It's not like where I'm going to get up and lead an offsite where I'm in front of, 150 people. And then even then I might kind of outline the way that I'm going to go. But in a way, I think what we're doing is we always say around admired leadership, everything happens in and because of a conversation. And so when you think, and we're big believers in the idea that they're not speeches, right? They're not, we don't do a lot of slide decks in our firm, that they're conversations, they're dialogues. And so if you're doing that and demonstrating that, well, they are also little parallels of normal hero journeys in a Joseph Campbell sense, which is we're here, we have this problem, we've got to get to here, there's a call to adventure in here, and there's kind of a setback, and then there's this, and you're kind of saying, well, let's go through, I'm walking through it, we're walking through it, we're in this process, this is what it looks like. And so I think that the goal here is of what did we talk about the other day? Epiphanies, right? It's like, wouldn't it be great if we actually had an expectation that in not all of our meetings, but in a good number, maybe even 51%, that we kind of had epiphanies?
Right.
Wouldn't that be sort of attractive and electric? Wouldn't you kind of be drawn to be like, I love being in an organization where our meetings seem to be little magical cauldrons?
Yeah, no, that's rare. Like when we talked about epiphanies, we talked about it in terms of like needing space in order for epiphanies to
Mm-hmm.
happen. So I don't imagine epiphanies happening in meetings, but there is something like when it happens as a result of collection of rubbing off on one another,
Mm-hmm.
and and then the epiphany comes. Those are
Mm-hmm.
magic moments. I think maybe I can only think back to once or twice where that has happened in a public setting. Most of the time when
Yeah.
things
Right.
dawn on me in special ways, it's because of space. So
Yeah.
yeah, how to create that would be a real challenge, but there would need to be a tremendous amount of openness and trust that we're not going to get squashed or our toes stepped on. And that kind
Right.
of climate can really only be set by the
Right.
leader who's constantly trying to, like even in the meeting, trying to nudge it and arrange it.
Well, and the other thing that I would say is that you can have a leader, and if you've read this field note or you've listened to this edition of Lead Better, um, there has to be a level of truth here, meaning you can't just be like, well, that was nice respectful dissent, and let's talk about some evidence based questions that have been raised. If your aura is sort of still spreading around, I just want you to do what I'm presenting, right? If
Mhm.
if you're being like, hey, give me your feedback, or hey, do this, or hey, let's talk about that, and then but everything about you is radiating, I don't really want that, and then you actually don't do that, then no matter how many times you say that these 6 ideas in this field note are really important, nobody will believe it.
Yeah, and sometimes the leader does need just a relational reset with people, and maybe it's with the people in the room, right? And the first time that you try to reset, people will be thinking that this isn't going to last. I don't know what's going on
Mhm.
here. Maybe he just went to a leadership conference, but there's something
Right.
different
Yes.
going on.
Right. Yeah.
And and the reset will only come once you do it 5, 6, 7 times in a row, and people start to recognize, oh,
That's
there really
yeah.
is something going on here
Yeah.
that's different.
And
Yeah.
and that's a fundamental thing that you've pointed out here about admired leadership in general. So whether you're getting the insights from the field notes, or you're talking with Alex, or you're in our main behavior platform, or even if you come back from a one-on-one coaching session, we do all of these things for leaders at all kinds of levels. But if you treat those things as just sort of a hack or a technique for you to manipulate people, they're not going to work.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, thank you. It's a good talk for a Saturday, and we'll talk again
There you go.
tomorrow. All right.
All right.
Bye now.
See you, Mikey.